The courtroom was silent, too silent. All eyes were fixed on a young black woman standing before the judge's bench. Her wrists were bound in cold, heavy handcuffs, her face pale yet determined. This was not how her life was supposed to unfold. Her name was Amara Johnson, 27 years old, sharp-minded, fiercely independent, and known for never bowing down to injustice. And now, in this critical moment, she stood accused of something she had not done. The officer holding her arm tightened his grip, dragging her closer to the bench. Amara's heart pounded. This wasn't just about her freedom, it was about her dignity, her family's name, her entire future. She had to decide, should she stay quiet and endure the humiliation, or should she speak out and risk everything? What choice would she make? Could one act of courage turn her chains into a crown? And how could a handcuffed woman ever become the very judge who now towered over her? The cinematic opening. The sunlight streamed through the tall courtroom windows, casting long golden beams across the polished wooden floor. The air smelled of dust, ink, and fear. People whispered nervously in the gallery, shifting in their seats, some curious, some judgmental. A child clutched her mother's hand tightly, sensing that something important was happening. Amara stood there, her curly black hair falling loosely over her shoulders, her chin lifted. She wasn't just another defendant, she carried herself with the poise of someone who believed in truth even when truth seemed powerless. Across the room, her mother, Lydia Johnson, sat trembling, her hands clasped together in prayer. She was a woman of faith, fragile but unshaken in her belief that her daughter was innocent. Beside her sat Amara's younger brother, Malik, 16, restless, his eyes blazing with anger. He whispered, "They can't do this to her, they just can't." But they already had. The hidden truth surfaces. The prosecutor, a stern man in his 40s named Richard Keller, rose to speak. His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. "Your Honor, this woman stands accused of obstructing justice. She defied lawful orders, tampered with evidence, and showed outright disrespect to law enforcement. She thinks she's above the law." The words stabbed Amara like knives. None of it was true. She wanted to shout, to fight back, but the cuffs bit into her skin, reminding her of the trap she was in. Her eyes shifted to the jury. Ordinary citizens, strangers who knew nothing about her life, her struggles, her sacrifices. Would they believe the polished lies of the prosecutor over the trembling truth in her heart? Then, as her gaze swept across the courtroom, she noticed something unusual, something hidden in plain sight. The officer who had arrested her, Officer Mark Stevens, avoided her eyes. He looked uneasy, almost guilty. His jaw tightened as though he was hiding something. Amara's mind raced. She remembered the night of her arrest, the confusion, the way Mark had suddenly found evidence in her car. It was too neat, too staged. Could it be that he had planted it? Was she paying the price for someone else's corruption? The fire inside. The judge, Eleanor Briggs, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a stern expression, cleared her throat. "Miss Johnson, do you have anything to say before we proceed?" This was the moment. Every heartbeat thundered in Amara's chest. Her lawyer, a young public defender named Sofia Ramirez, whispered urgently, "Don't say anything reckless. Let me handle it." But how could Amara stay silent when her dignity was burning inside her? She lifted her chin and spoke, her voice clear and steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I have something to say. The truth." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Even the judge leaned forward. "I did not commit the crime they accuse me of," Amara continued. "And the man who arrested me knows that. Evidence was planted. Someone here is afraid of the truth." The prosecutor slammed his fist on the table. "Objection. This is outrageous. She's attempting to manipulate the court with baseless accusations." But Amara did not waver. She locked eyes with Officer Stevens. His face reddened. His hands clenched. And in that instant, she saw fear flicker in his eyes. Family ties. In the gallery, Malik nearly leapt from his seat. "That's right, Amara. Tell them," he shouted, before his mother pulled him down. "Quiet," Judge Briggs ordered, banging the gavel. Lydia whispered, tears streaming, "Hold on, baby. Hold on." The atmosphere shifted. The room was no longer just a courtroom, it was a battlefield of truth and lies, dignity and disgrace. The bold action. Amara knew her words might seal her fate, but she didn't care. She raised her bound hand slightly, the cuffs glinting in the sunlight. "If you want to punish me for speaking the truth, then do it. But I will not be silent. Not today, not ever." The gallery erupted with whispers. Some nodded in sympathy, others shook their heads, convinced she was reckless. Judge Briggs frowned, her expression unreadable. She scribbled something on her notepad, then looked at Amara again with curious eyes, almost as if she admired her courage. But the prosecutor smirked, sensing an opportunity. "Your Honor, this behavior proves my point. She has no respect for this court. I recommend immediate contempt charges in addition to her trial." The judge hesitated. The courtroom held its breath. The twist of chains. Officer Stevens stepped forward suddenly. His voice cracked slightly. "Your Honor, with all due respect, maybe we should." But Keller shot him a warning glance, and Stevens went silent. That was it. That was the crack in the wall. Amara saw it. The truth was there, hiding behind uniforms and polished words. And she would uncover it, no matter the cost. The suspenseful cliffhanger. Judge Briggs raised her gavel. "Enough. This court will take a short recess before I decide the next step." The bailiff pulled Amara roughly by the arm, dragging her toward the holding cell. But as she passed Officer Stevens, she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "I know what you did. And soon, everyone else will too." His face drained of color. The gallery buzzed with speculation. Malik clenched his fists, Lydia prayed harder, Sophia scribbled frantic notes. The entire courtroom was caught in a storm of questions. Would the truth come out? Would Amara's courage save her or destroy her? And why did Judge Briggs look at her not with condemnation, but with something else, something almost like recognition? As the heavy cell door closed behind her, Amara's eyes still burned with fire. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. The corridors outside the courtroom were dim, echoing with the hollow footsteps of officers escorting Amara back to the holding cell. Each step felt heavier than the last, but her spirit was far from broken. Inside her chest, anger mixed with determination. She whispered to herself, "They think these chains can silence me, but they have no idea who I really am." Inside the gallery, Malik couldn't sit still. He turned to his mother, frustration clear in his voice. "Mom, why aren't you saying something? They're treating her like a criminal when she's not." Lydia placed a trembling hand on her son's arm. "Malik, sometimes silence is stronger than noise. Let God fight for her." But Malik's eyes burned. He didn't want to wait for God, he wanted justice now. Back in the judge's chamber, Judge Briggs sat quietly, staring at the case file. She tapped her pen on the desk, her face thoughtful. There was something about Amara's defiance that stirred a memory. Long ago, Briggs had faced her own trial, not in court, but in life. A memory of a young black girl, standing against injustice, refusing to bow down, came rushing back. For a moment, the judge felt as if she were staring at her younger self. Meanwhile, Officer Stevens stood in the hallway, his hands shaking slightly. His fellow officer slapped him on the back. "Don't let her words get to you, Mark. She's just another case." But Stevens couldn't shake it. He knew the evidence hadn't been hers. He remembered the night too clearly, the pressure from the prosecutor, the orders he didn't want to follow, and the guilt that had eaten at him since. Amara's piercing eyes had reached into his soul, and for the first time, he questioned whether his silence was worth the burden on his conscience. In the holding cell, Amara sat on the hard bench, her wrists still sore from the cuffs. Her lawyer, Sophia Ramirez, walked in, frustration written all over her face. "Amara, do you realize what you just did back there? You practically accused a police officer of corruption in open court. That's dangerous." Amara looked her straight in the eyes. And what do you suggest? Stay quiet? Let them bury me alive under lies? No, Sophia. If I don't fight now, I'll regret it forever. Sophia sighed. I admire your courage, but the system doesn't reward truth, it punishes it. If we're going to win, we need strategy, not just fire. Amara leaned back against the cold wall. Then help me find proof. Because I know what I saw in Stephen's eyes. He's hiding something. If we expose it, everything changes. At that same moment, in the judge's private office, Judge Briggs picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Her voice softened, filled with an old ache. It's me. I need to ask about the Johnson family. Yes, the daughter. Amara. The silence on the other end said more than words. There was a history here, a secret that connected Briggs and Amara in ways no one yet understood. Back at home, Malik sat by the window, staring at the city lights. He remembered how Amara had raised him after their father died, how she had worked 2 jobs just to pay for his school books, how she had taught him to stand tall even when the world tried to push them down. The thought of her behind bars made his chest ache. He clenched his fists. I won't let them destroy her, he whispered. Not while I'm alive. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with whispers as the trial resumed. Journalists had gathered, sensing drama in the case. Lydia clutched her Bible, her lips moving in prayer. Malik's eyes darted around, watching every move of the officers. When Amara was brought back into the courtroom, her head was high, her gaze steady. She spotted Officer Stevens again, and once more, he couldn't hold her eyes. Sweat rolled down his temple. He looked like a man carrying a secret too heavy for his shoulders. Judge Briggs entered, her gavel striking the bench. This court is now in session. Her eyes swept the room and paused for a second too long on Amara. Something flickered in her expression, was it recognition? Compassion? No one could tell. The prosecutor stood, confident as ever. Your Honor, we are prepared to continue. But let me make one thing clear, this defendant has shown disrespect for the law. She should not be treated with leniency. Sophia rose quickly. Your Honor, my client deserves fairness, not prejudice. We have reason to believe the evidence in this case may have been compromised. The courtroom gasped. All eyes turned to Officer Stevens. His throat tightened, his lips pressing into a thin line. Judge Briggs leaned forward, her voice sharp. Officer Stevens approached the bench. The officer froze, his boots heavy as he walked. The sound of each step filled the silence. He stood before the judge, his shoulders tense, his eyes downcast. Judge Briggs' voice was calm but commanding. Officer, is there anything this court should know about the evidence presented against Miss Johnson? Stevens' chest rose and fell. He could feel the weight of the entire room pressing on him. He glanced at Amara, her eyes steady, waiting. His lips parted, but no sound came. He looked at the prosecutor, who gave him a warning glare. The tension was unbearable. Stevens' hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the bench. His silence spoke louder than words. And then, he whispered something so low only the judge could hear. Her eyes widened. She leaned back slowly in her chair, her face unreadable. Then she struck the gavel once. This court will adjourn until tomorrow morning. The night felt heavy as Amara lay on the thin mattress inside the holding cell. Sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed the moment Officer Stevens had leaned in and whispered something to Judge Briggs, something that changed the judge's entire expression. What had he said? Why had she ended court so suddenly? Every second stretched into hours as the questions burned inside her. Meanwhile, Judge Briggs sat alone in her office, staring at the closed case file. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for an old photograph hidden in her desk drawer. It was a picture of a much younger Amara with her mother, Lydia, standing in front of a community center. Briggs' eyes softened. She remembered that day, years ago, when Lydia had come to her for help. Back then, Briggs had been a rising lawyer, and Lydia had been a desperate mother fighting eviction. Briggs had promised to help, but circumstances forced her to walk away, leaving Lydia and her children to struggle alone. Guilt pressed heavily on her chest now. Was fate giving her another chance to make things right? Across town, Malik paced the living room floor. His anger had grown into a storm. "They're hiding something, Mom. I can feel it. That cop, he knows Amara's innocent." Lydia shook her head, her voice trembling. "Justice doesn't move fast, Malik. We must pray." But Malik wasn't convinced. He was young, fiery, unwilling to wait. He pulled out his phone, messaging a friend who knew people in the streets. "If the law won't help my sister, maybe someone else will." Back in the cell block, Sofia Ramirez came to see Amara. Her usually confident face looked pale. "Something happened today, Amara." When Stevens whispered to the judge, everything shifted. "I don't know what he said, but Judge Briggs is holding something back." Amara leaned forward, gripping the bars. "You believe me now, don't you?" He planted it. "And now he's cracking." Sofia nodded reluctantly. "I believe you. But belief isn't enough. We need evidence." The next morning, the courtroom was fuller than ever. Reporters filled the benches, cameras clicked outside the doors. The public was hungry for scandal. Whispers filled the air. What did the officer say? Why did the judge adjourn so suddenly? Amara was escorted in, her chin high despite the chains. Malik and Lydia were already seated, their faces drawn with worry. Malik leaned forward, whispering, "Stay strong, sis. You're not alone." When Judge Briggs entered, the room fell into silence. She adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. "This court will resume." The prosecutor, Richard Keller, wasted no time. "Your Honor, I insist we proceed without delay. This case must not be derailed by baseless accusations." His voice was sharp, but there was a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. Judge Briggs raised her hand. "Before we proceed, I will call Officer Mark Stevens back to the stand." The officer's face turned pale. Slowly, he walked to the front, the eyes of the courtroom piercing him like daggers. "Officer Stevens," the judge said firmly, "yesterday you shared information with this court that was not on record. Today, you will repeat it aloud." Stevens' throat tightened. He looked at Keller, whose glare warned him to stay silent. He looked at Amara, whose steady eyes begged him to speak the truth. His chest rose and fell heavily. Finally, his voice cracked as he spoke. "The evidence found in Miss Johnson's car, it wasn't hers. I was ordered to put it there." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Gasps, shouts, the clatter of chairs. Malik leapt to his feet, shouting, "I knew it! I knew it!" Lydia covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Judge Briggs slammed her gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" The prosecutor's face went red with rage. "This is a lie. Officer, do you understand what you're saying?" Stevens' voice shook, but he stood taller. "I understand. And I'm done carrying someone else's crime on my shoulders." Every reporter scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. The entire city would know by nightfall. But just when hope sparked in Amara's chest, Keller's lips curled into a cold smile. "Your Honor, this so-called confession proves nothing without proof." One man's words against the system? Convenient, isn't it? Perhaps this officer is protecting himself by creating a story. The judge's gavel struck again. "Enough, Mr. Keller. This court will review all evidence, including the testimony just given." Amara's heart pounded. The truth was finally breaking through. But she also knew Keller was right about one thing: without hard proof, the system could twist Stevens' words into dust. As the bailiffs led her back to the holding cell, Amara glanced at Judge Briggs. For a brief second, the judge's eyes softened, filled with something more than duty. Almost as if she were silently promising, "I won't let them bury you." But promises were fragile. Outside the courtroom, Keller made a quiet phone call, his tone sharp and dangerous. "We have a problem." Handle it before it spreads. That night, as Amara sat in the dim cell, she heard footsteps approach. A guard leaned close to the bars, his voice low and urgent. You need to be careful. Some people don't want you walking out of here alive. The warning sent a chill through her veins. This was bigger than her. Bigger than one trial. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom, she was fighting against a system that would rather silence her forever than let the truth come out. And in the shadows outside, a pair of eyes watched the jail with cold determination. Someone powerful had decided Amara Johnson was too dangerous to live. The night was restless in the city. A storm gathered above, lightning streaking the sky as if heaven itself was unsettled. Inside the jail, Amara sat on her bed, replaying the guard's warning. Some people don't want you walking out of here alive. The words echoed in her mind, colder than the iron bars around her. She wrapped her arms around herself, whispering, if they think fear will break me, they don't know me at all. Meanwhile, across town, Prosecutor Richard Keller met with two men in a dimly lit parking garage. Their faces were hard, their eyes empty of mercy. Keller's voice was sharp, dripping with arrogance. She's becoming a problem. That officer's testimony was dangerous. Make sure she doesn't live to testify again. Do it quietly. No mistakes. One of the men nodded, slipping his hand into his jacket. Consider it done. At home, Malik couldn't sleep either. His instincts told him something worse was coming. He scrolled through his phone, his fingers shaking as he typed messages to friends who lived near the jail. Keep your eyes open tonight. Something's not right. Watch over my sister. His loyalty burned like fire, he would not let Amara stand alone. Judge Briggs, however, sat in her private chambers staring at a file she had kept hidden for years. It contained the truth about Amara's late father, a man who once fought against the same corrupt circle Keller belonged to. Briggs whispered to herself, it's the same battle all over again, and she doesn't even know. Her conscience gnawed at her. She wanted to protect Amara, but revealing the truth meant exposing secrets that could destroy her own career. As midnight approached, the jail grew quiet. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional clank of metal keys echoed through the halls. A shadow moved in the corridor, one of Keller's men, disguised as a guard. His steps were slow, deliberate, predatory. Amara felt it before she saw it. The air shifted, heavy with danger. She lifted her head just as the shadow stopped in front of her cell. The man slid a key into the lock, his face hidden under a cap. You've spoken too much, he whispered. Time to end it. Fear stabbed her heart, but her spirit rose like a flame. If you kill me, she said firmly, you'll prove everything I've said about this system. The man smirked. Dead women don't speak. Before he could move further, a loud crash echoed through the corridor. Malik and two of his friends burst in, having followed their instincts and slipped past the outer watch. Malik grabbed a metal pipe, his voice trembling but fierce. Touch her, and I'll make sure the whole city knows who sent you. The intruder froze, his eyes darting between the siblings. The tension snapped when footsteps thundered from the other side, real guards rushing in, alerted by the commotion. The fake guard tried to flee, but Malik swung the pipe, knocking him down just as the officers arrived. Chaos erupted. The man was restrained, his disguise ripped off, and questions filled the air. Who is he? How did he get in? Who sent him? The warden looked shaken, muttering about an internal investigation. Through the bars, Amara's eyes met Malik's. She wanted to scold him for the danger he put himself in, but pride filled her voice instead. You saved me. Malik grinned weakly, tears brimming. I told you, Amara, you'll never fight alone. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed like a hornet's nest. News had already spread of the attempted attack. Journalists shouted questions, cameras flashed, and whispers filled the benches. Lydia clutched her Bible tighter than ever, silently thanking God for sparing her daughter. Judge Briggs entered with a grave expression. This trial is no longer just about a single case. It is about the integrity of justice itself. Her gavel struck. Officer Stevens stepped forward again. The officer stood, his voice steadier this time. Your Honor, I can no longer protect the people who ordered me. I'll give names, records, everything I know. But I need protection. Keller's face went pale. Sweat trickled down his temple. He leaned toward the judge, his voice sharp. This is outrageous. These so-called revelations are nothing but desperate attempts to derail justice. But the gallery murmured louder. The people were beginning to see through the lies. Amara stood, her voice trembling yet unbroken. This is bigger than me. If they can do this to one woman, they can do it to anyone. That's why the truth has to come out. Judge Briggs looked at her, the weight of years pressing on her shoulders. Inside her heart, she knew the final secret she carried could change everything, but revealing it meant exposing her own past connection to the Johnson family. She struck the gavel. Court is adjourned until tomorrow. And tomorrow, the truth will not be silenced. Outside the courthouse, Keller spoke into his phone again, his voice low and venomous. She's survived once. But tomorrow, make sure she doesn't walk out alive. And from the shadows, another figure watched, someone neither Amara nor Keller expected. A figure who knew secrets both sides had buried long ago. The storm above the city roared louder, as if preparing for a night when everything would finally break. The storm raged outside as dawn broke, thunder rolling like a drumbeat of destiny. The courthouse stood tall against the gray sky, its windows glowing faintly with the first light of day. Inside, anticipation thickened the air. The trial had become the city's heartbeat, everyone was waiting to see if truth would finally defeat power. Amara was led into the courtroom, her wrists still bound, but her head held high. The bruises on her wrists from the cuffs told a story of struggle, yet her eyes blazed with unshaken resolve. Lydia reached out from the gallery, whispering a prayer as tears slipped down her cheeks. Malik sat beside her, restless, his fists clenched as though ready for battle. Judge Briggs entered, her face carved with determination. She had not slept all night. Memories had tormented her, Lydia's tearful plea years ago, Amara's father standing tall against corruption, and her own silence when she should have spoken. This trial was no longer about law alone, it was about redemption, hers as much as Amara's. The gallery hushed as the gavel struck. This court will resume. Today, we hear full testimony from Officer Mark Stevens. Stevens stepped forward, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. He knew this moment would decide everything. His voice shook, but he forced it steady. I was ordered by higher officials to plant evidence in Miss Johnson's car. That order came from Prosecutor Richard Keller. The words exploded like lightning. Gasps filled the room, reporters scribbled furiously, and Keller shot to his feet, red with fury. Your Honor, this is slander. This man is trying to save his own skin. But Stevens pressed on, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. I recorded the conversation the night I was ordered. It's all here. Proof. The courtroom froze. The flash drive was handed to the clerk, then to Judge Briggs. She nodded toward the technician. Within moments, the courtroom filled with the chilling sound of Keller's voice on the recording. Do it clean. Plant the bag. No one will question it. She'll go down, and we'll be rid of her. Every face in the courtroom turned toward Keller. His mask of confidence shattered, leaving only panic. Malik jumped to his feet, shouting, You see? She was innocent all along. Lydia sobbed, whispering, Thank you, Lord. Judge Briggs slammed her gavel to restore order. But before she could speak, Keller's voice rang out again, this time not from the recording, but from his own lips. You fools think this ends here? You don't know who you're dealing with. There are people above me, people who control everything. You take me down, and they'll come for all of you. The words sent a chill across the courtroom. He wasn't lying, everyone could feel it. Something bigger, darker, stood behind him. Amara rose slowly, her cuffs clinking. Her voice cut through the tension. You can threaten, you can lie, but truth always finds a way. My father died fighting men like you. I won't stop until your entire network is exposed. Judge Briggs froze at the mention of Amara's father. Her heart pounded. She could no longer stay silent. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Miss Johnson, your father, Daniel Johnson, once came to me years ago. He begged me to take his case against the very corruption we see today. I failed him. I was young, afraid of losing my career. I walked away. And not long after, he was gone." The room fell silent. Lydia covered her face, trembling. Amara stared at the judge, shock and anger colliding in her chest. "You knew my father?" Briggs' eyes glistened. "Yes. And I carry that guilt every day. But today, I will not fail you. I swear it." The gavel struck hard. "This court will call for federal investigators. All evidence will be turned over. This corruption will be exposed." But even as hope sparked in the gallery, Keller smirked, his eyes dark. "You think you've won, Judge? You don't know the storm you've unleashed. They won't let you finish this trial alive." Before anyone could react, a loud bang echoed from outside the courthouse. The doors rattled as if struck, and panicked shouts rose from the hall. Officers rushed to the exits, guns drawn. The crowd inside screamed, ducking for cover. Judge Briggs' face went pale. Malik grabbed Lydia protectively, while Amara stood frozen in her chains. The danger Keller had promised had arrived, right on time. As the chaos built, one truth became clear: the trial had cracked open something much bigger than anyone expected. And now, powerful forces were coming to silence them all. The courthouse shook as the blast outside echoed through its halls. Panic swept across the courtroom, papers flew, chairs toppled, people screamed. Armed officers poured in, shouting for everyone to stay down. Amara's heart pounded as chains clinked around her wrists, her body frozen between fear and determination. Malik shielded Lydia with his body, shouting, "Stay behind me, Mom." His eyes darted toward his sister, helpless rage burning within him. Judge Briggs slammed her gavel though no one could hear it over the chaos. Her voice rose above the storm, everyone remain calm. Secure the defendant. Secure this courtroom. But the danger wasn't outside anymore. It had slipped inside. Two masked men, dressed in black, stormed through the side doors with weapons drawn. Their target was clear: Amara. The room erupted. Officers exchanged gunfire with the intruders, civilians ducked under benches, reporters scrambled for cover, cameras clattering to the floor. The masked men pushed forward, ruthless and precise. One of them shouted, "Take her out now." Malik's instincts overpowered fear. He vaulted over the railing, rushing toward his sister, ignoring Lydia's desperate cry. "No, Malik, no." A bullet whizzed past, splintering the wooden floor at his feet. He dove behind a bench, grabbing a fallen officer's baton. His eyes locked with Amara's. She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "Don't risk yourself for me." But Malik whispered back fiercely, "You risk everything for us. Now it's my turn." Judge Briggs stood tall, refusing to run. For years she had stayed silent in the face of corruption, but not today. She stepped forward, her voice commanding. "This is a court of law. And as long as I stand, justice will not bow to violence." Her defiance stunned the attackers for a brief moment. That hesitation was all Officer Stevens needed. He charged, tackling one of the masked men, knocking the gun from his hands. The second man raised his weapon toward Amara, but Malik swung the baton with all his strength, striking him down. Silence fell as officers swarmed the attackers, forcing them to the ground. The courtroom, once a battlefield, was now littered with overturned benches and trembling witnesses. Amara's chest heaved, her wrists still chained, but her spirit unbroken. Slowly, Judge Briggs walked to her, her silver hair disheveled, her eyes shining with resolve. She ordered the bailiff, "Remove her chains. She has worn them long enough." The cuffs clicked open, falling to the floor with a metallic thud that echoed like freedom itself. Amara rubbed her wrists, her eyes filling with tears. Judge Briggs placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father believed in truth, Amara. He died for it. Today, you have carried his torch. Reporters dared to rise again, snapping photos, capturing every moment. The story was no longer just about a trial, it was about survival, courage, and the shattering of a corrupt empire. Prosecutor Keller, cornered, tried to slip out in the chaos. But Stevens stepped in front of him, blocking the way. You're finished, Keller. The whole city knows now. Officers moved in, cuffing Keller as he raged, spitting threats. This isn't over. You'll never destroy all of them. But his words fell on deaf ears. The system he had hidden behind was finally crumbling. In the days that followed, the recordings and testimonies sparked investigations that rippled far beyond the courtroom. High-ranking officials were arrested, and a corrupt network unraveled piece by piece. For once, the truth had fought its way to the surface. Months later, in the very same courtroom where she once stood in chains, Amara Johnson walked to the bench not as a defendant, but as its new judge. The audience rose in respect, their applause filling the chamber. Malik and Lydia sat in the front row, tears of pride in their eyes. Judge Briggs, now retired, watched from the gallery, her heart lighter than it had been in decades. She leaned toward Lydia and whispered, "She is the woman I always knew she could be." Amara adjusted her robes, the gavel in her hand heavy with meaning. She looked out at the people before her, remembering every humiliation, every fight, every tear that had brought her here. Her voice was steady, strong, and filled with the weight of justice. This court will always stand for truth. No matter the cost. The same chains that once held her down had become symbols of victory. Her father's legacy lived on through her courage. And her story carried a message for all who listened. No matter how strong lies may seem, truth will always find a way to rise. The gavel struck once. Justice, at last, had spoken.